This is KSL Sunday Edition with Boyd Matheson.
Welcome to Sunday Edition. I am Boyd Matheson. Each Sunday we attempt to divide the rage from the reason, elevate the conversation, connect the dots, and make the news make sense. We have conversations with great thinkers, great leaders, and great people who are just making a difference. We talk politics so we can discuss society, and we explore society so we can discuss principles and the people in America who live them. We bring the best and brightest to the state of Utah, and we send the Utah model to our nation's capital and beyond. Today, we're going to go on an extraordinary journey from tyranny to freedom with Yeonmi Park. Born in North Korea, she grew up in a punishing society devoted to the worship of Kim Jong-il. But at the age of 13, she and her family made a daring escape to China in search of a life free of tyranny. In her viral talks viewed online by nearly 350 million people, Park urges audiences around the world to recognize and resist the oppression of ruthless regimes and to instead pursue and preserve the power of freedom. And Yeonmi, welcome to Inside Sunday Edition, and it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So give us a little bit of the beginning. What was it like growing up under that kind of regime in North Korea?
I think in a way I can even say that is the first thing that my mother taught me as a young girl was don't even whisper, because the birds and mice could hear me. And she said the most dangerous thing that I had in my body was my tongue. If I said one wrong word in the eyes of a regime, that was going to kill up to 3 generations of my family. So really early on, I learned not to even say things, but that meant like not to even think.
Wow.
Because I was so scared that Kim Jong-il could read my mind and punish me.
Yeah, and so often people ask that question, you know, why don't the North Korean people just rise up? But you talk about that oppressive regime to the point that you're worried about even thinking about anything.
And also to the point that the oppression that we talk about when it comes to North Koreans is not even similar to like Venezuela or Cuba. People in North Korea, they don't even know that they are oppressed. They don't have the word to describe what oppression is. So if you don't know you're a slave, how do you fight to be free? And that is the thing in North Korea. People don't know they are living under the dictatorship. They don't know that they have rights as human beings. And we don't even have internet. Have you ever seen the picture of North Korea at nighttime? Like it's the darkest place in the world. Yeah. So we don't even know that outside the world like this exists. Yeah. And that's why there has been no revolution over the last 80 years.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I've heard you talk about it in the context of even something like compassion. You have to, all these things you have to be taught, these principles.
Yeah, I think that's a thing. Like, I was born in 1993. That was after the Soviet Union collapsed. And until Soviet Union's collapse, they were subsidizing North Koreans' economy. And North Korea was relatively doing okay, but by the time when I was born, that's when mass, like people dying from starvation. And growing up, like looking at dead bodies were like looking at a tree. Nobody told me that I had to feel bad for those people. I only learned the concept of compassion when I went to South Korea. When people taught me the word what compassion was.
Yeah. Let's talk about your escape from North Korea and the journey, the challenges that went along with that. What was it that gave you that spark or that idea of maybe we should go somewhere else?
It was seeing the lights at nighttime. I was living in the border town of North Korea called Matheson. And then at nighttime, I was seeing the lights in Chinese side. And I was wondering, why do they have lights? Maybe if I go where the lights were, I could find a bowl of rice. And with that clue, we decided to escape from North Korea.
Wow, for a bowl of rice. That speaks volumes in terms of what that was like. You made it into China, but that didn't make life necessarily any easier for you.
In some sense, I guess it's a lot worse. Because when we got to China, I was sold from my mom away from her, and we were both sex slaves in China. So this is a common fate that North Korean women facing in China. So when they go to China, instead of Chinese government protecting us, they send us back to North Korea, which means we are gonna get executed and tortured and die. So we are extremely vulnerable, and there are human traffickers take advantage of our vulnerability and set us as sex slaves.
Yeah. So you go towards the light, then you become a slave in essence.
Yeah.
How did you get from there to the next step? What was that moment, and what kept you going in all of that?
I think one thing that I learned from my own father was that he taught me, no matter what in life, that life was worth fighting for, no matter what. So even as a sex slave, I had to keep fighting for my life. And after 2 years of my slavery, when I was 15 years old, we met the Christian missionaries from South Korea who were rescuing North Korean defectors to freedom.
Wow.
And they helped us to go to South Korea through Gobi Desert to Mongolia.
Wow. Describe that journey quickly for us.
So these missionaries told us, because North Koreans don't have passports, right? That we were like searched for everywhere. So they said there's a way to go to South Korea, which meant we had to walk across frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia from China.
Wow.
And somehow, with a miracle, we made that journey. And then from Mongolia, they helped us to go to South Korea as refugees.
Wow. And then from there, obviously, so now you're in a refugee status. Talk to us about that part of the journey in terms of going from refugee status to America and beyond.
Yeah, so I was sent to South Korea, and I was there for 5 years. And I came to America 8 years ago to study at Columbia University. So as you never know what can be possible in life.
Yeah, it's so amazing as you look at that. As you look back at that journey, give us one thing that really stood out. What was a principle or something that kept you going throughout that whole journey?
I think my case is there is something beyond you. I think for me that was God. You know, a lot of times He carried me through that desert. He carried me through all that journey. So I think, so statistically speaking right now, over the last 80 years, there's only about 209 of North Koreans made it to America. Literally. Wow. So little number, and I was one of them. So I think this is something is beyond you. Yeah. And I think I don't know why I was chosen, but I was chosen.
Yeah. And what a difference a day can make.
Exactly.
Just one little thing. Well, that's fantastic. We are going to stay with the conversation with Yeonmi Park as we continue here on Sunday Edition. When we come back, we're going to look at some of the things that we should learn from the principles of freedom, what happens when freedom is lost, and what happens when we don't teach it to the next generation. Much more coming up on Sunday Edition here on KSL 5. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. We're staying with the conversation with Yeonmi Park, North Korean defector, human rights activist, as well as a best-selling author of several books, including one that is so important, While Time Remains, a North Korean defector's search for freedom in America. And Yeonmi, that's where I want to begin this part of the show today, is talking about some of those things that you've been watching in America and some things that we all maybe should be thinking about in terms of preserving and extending that freedom.
Right. I think people, this one I was not prepared to see this in America when I came here. As I mentioned before, I came to America to study at Columbia University. And when I went to my university lecture room, I was really shocked because the professors were teaching exact same things that my North Korean teachers taught me in North Korean classroom. We are learning exact same things. Like, for instance, how white men are evil, how all the problem exists in the world is because of white men and greedy capitalism, and because of Western civilization. Yeah. And this kind of hate, anti-freedom, anti-American ideas are taught in American classrooms. That is the same thing in North Korea. Yeah. And where is the future for us? Yeah. That really concerns me. Yeah,
when you look at that and having experienced both sides of that equation, the freedom side and the oppression side, including things like freedom of religion and freedom to think, give us a sense of what you have experienced and then what you see here in America that could be troubling.
So I think this is where I was really concerned about. Like, people think in America we live in democracy. Of course we are. But they don't know what are the pillars of democracy. It is freedom of speech, like law and order and pluralism, right? Yeah. And at Columbia, professors were teaching us, even though this is democracy, we cannot have free speech because it can hurt somebody's feelings. In the name of safe space, we cannot have freedom of speech. And this idea is subscribed by the brightest people in America right now, the young people in college campuses. And how they understand freedom is in a way like tyranny. They want tyranny, and they keep saying that's freedom. So I think that's when I realized that we are on the same path in a way the North Korean regime is on, that brainwashing the next generation. And like as George Orwell talked about it, right? Slavery is freedom. It's like that. There's almost like a dual meaning into words.
Yeah.
Safe space is not safe space. It's where you are not on a safe space, literally.
Yeah.
And almost this kind of language changing. And I think that's happening in America.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been most impressed in listening to you speak and all of your work is that we do have this idea of the words have meaning and the meaning matters, and we're losing some of that. But we're also losing this ability to have critical thinking.
Right.
And you talked about that all the way back to living in North Korea, that if you don't have that ability to think critically, that's really the beginning of the end of your freedom.
Right. I think this is the thing. The fundamental to think critically, you have to have ability to talk. The reason why people go to therapy, because that's how we think. We think by talking. That's what humans do. And when you block people talking, that's how you control what they think, even eventually. That's why the North Korean regime makes sure that people cannot talk about certain subjects and cannot use certain words. And now in America, in the name of safe space, we are doing exact same thing. And that's why we have a generation of people who cannot think critically right now.
Wow, that's such and we could spend an hour just talking about that, that principle alone. You tell me a little bit about your human rights work. You clearly learned the word compassion, even though you didn't grow up with compassion. You clearly learned that and have spent a lot of your time, both here in the U.S. and around the world, shedding light where we do need to have compassion for human rights.
Yeah, I think, so this is where I come in. I came to America with the hope that we can do something about the modern slavery. I was one of them. My mother was sold for $65, and I was sold for over $20 because I was 13, child virgin. There are 300,000 North Korean women in China currently are being sold. In China right now, it's almost like ordering a girl like Uber Eats. They send the girl to be raped and killed by you. And this fact, I was trying to talk about that. I was censored by Hollywood and mainstream media. There's so much economic ties in America that so many people were covering these facts, what's been done under CCP. And this is my life is going right now. Try to wake up people. And CCP in a way is a new Nazi, what they are doing. They are literally committing crime against humanity. And there are so many modern day slaves like myself exist. And this is a time for us to fight for slavery like what we did back then.
Yeah, nothing more important. As you look at the path forward, as you travel around the country in particular, you speak to a lot of young people for sure. What is it that you hope that we all think a little differently about when it comes to our freedoms here in America?
I think that's a thing like where people, in America right now, especially the generation of Americans who grew up in freedom, like who were born in freedom, they somehow think that's like freedom is a given condition, right? Like it's like a breathing air, so natural that you have freedom. They don't understand how fragile, how unusual that for human to be free, actually. Being a free man is like a real unusual thing even in the modern world. Right now, more than 4 billion people living in somewhat authoritarian dictatorship countries. So they don't even understand being free is like an unusual thing right now. So I think that's what I want them to understand. Freedom is so precious. And if you lose it, you might never get back.
Yeah, it is fragile, isn't it, as we have
It really is.
Such an important part of that conversation. Give us one last thought. Give us one thing that we should all think about today when it comes to freedom.
So I think this is where I really want us to understand. Look at South Korea and North Korea. Same exact history, exact same tradition and country and people. One country chose freedom, one country chose socialism. What did it become? The one country become a country of BTS and Samsung, right? One country is known for starvation and concentration camps. So if we gotta subscribe to the right ideas in America too, because we can easily become like North Korea if we choose the wrong ideas.
Great. A wonderful perspective, Yeonmi Park. Thank you so much for joining us on Sunday Edition today. Fantastic work. Check out her most recent book, While Time Remains. While Time Remains. That's an important thing for all of us to think through. More Sunday Edition coming up next on KSL 5 TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. We shift now from empires of oppression and empires of freedom to personal empires we all can create. Speaking at Harvard University commencement ceremony, Winston Churchill somewhat prophetically predicted the collapse of the world's most dominant military and political empires, and that the world would then enter a new phase of development. The new phase, Churchill foretold, would be one where creativity, innovation, ingenuity, and personal initiative would actually rule the day. Churchill said that the empires of the future will be the empires of the mind. Churchill couldn't have been more right. Here in America, we've been on a fast track of revolutionary development, technological breakthroughs, transformational products, and personalized services. We now experience more changes and innovation in one of our 24-hour days than was created in decades of our grandparents' lives. In such a fast-forward society, knowledgepreneurs will always be in demand. Forever learners are always the most successful and highly compensated people, regardless of the field of endeavor that they choose to pursue. Interestingly, the shelf life of a university degree in a rapidly changing world is shrinking rapidly. Some experts posit that those graduating with a degree only have about an 18-month head start in the workplace versus non-graduates, depending on the profession. But regardless of measurement or advantage, the key for students exiting college with an eye towards creating their own career and professional empire is pretty simple. Be a forever learner. The two most important takeaways a student should acquire from their time they enter kindergarten all the way through college graduation are really simple: to learn how to learn and to learn to love learning. The discipline of knowing how to learn new skills, expand ideas, and stretch knowledge is central to building and growing a personal empire of the mind. Sadly, much of our over-structured learning models establish negative associations to learning. So rather than fostering a love of learning, most people end up dreading learning. This is where truly high-impact teachers and mentors do their most important work. Creating space for students to love the learning while developing the disciplines and skills to do it well is the essence of great teaching today. Sadly, we rarely compensate such empires of the mind kinds of teachers properly, rewarding instead those who do individual research or write white papers for periodicals. Teachers who actually transmit a love of learning to their students transform lives and communities while changing the trajectory of generations to come. The late author and historian David McCullough experienced an empire of the mind kind of teacher at Yale that changed his life and positively impacted the millions who have read McCullough's works ever since. Sitting in the Library of Congress, appropriately, I once listened to McCullough as he described to me his experience with the teacher who transformed his life. McCullough was actually an English major, but needed a history credit to graduate. He wasn't fond of memorizing and dreaded taking this class. He walked into the large hall and McCullough grumbled to himself that the class was going to be taught by a graduate assistant instead of a real professor. Well, that graduate assistant, John Hubbard, walked in the room. Hubbard believed that the best way to teach was to show the students what you love. He informed the class that they would not be tested on dates, locations, or events. The class would focus entirely on the stories and the principles and the people who actually lived them and made history. David McCullough said, "It was like a window was blown open for me." He said, "In that instant, history was no longer a collection of facts and dates, but it became an inexhaustible river of ideas to be explored." So the foundation of an empire of the mind had been laid, a forever learner had been launched. McCullough went on, of course, to become renowned the world over as the master of the art of narrative history. He was the winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes, 2 National Book Awards, and received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian award. More importantly, McCullough was still learning right up to the day he passed away. McCullough taught me that discovery comes most often not from finding something unknown or long hidden, but from seeing afresh what has been on the table all along. His empire not only expanded to bridge the past and the present, he inspired many to begin work on their own empire of the mind. I recently heard of an incredibly successful tech entrepreneur whose cell phone list and contacts and connections was as massive as it was impressive. He then announced that out of all of his contacts, he had identified just 70 people who he would always take a call or always respond to immediately. His criteria was based on one critical question, which was, is this person still learning? You see, people who are committed to forever learning are always worth talking to. They are the true empire builders. Now, formal learning has its place in preparing students for careers in life. However, learning should never be limited to libraries or confined to classrooms. My dad, one of the great empire of the mind builders, taught me that if you want to truly learn something, you should read 5 books about it, talk to 3 people who knew about it, and then go out and try it and apply it yourself. In every field of learning, from mechanical engineering, mathematics, and medicine to family living, vocational trades, and even to education itself, success and impact will be dependent to a large degree on recognizing that Churchill was right. The empires of the future really will be the empires of the mind. That's so important in our world today, that we are constantly learning, that we are outrageously and courageously curious every single day, that we're never willing to accept the status quo, that we can always question and wonder, I wonder why she thinks that way, or I wonder why he thinks that's a good solution. Because the people who are forever learning are those who are forever building. They're the people who actually make a difference in our communities, and they are the ones who make a big difference in our country as well. Well, that wraps it up for us here on Sunday Edition. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Boyd Matheson, and as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference. Music and the spoken word is next.